In this video, I am going to work on connecting a Razor Pages web app, this is .NET 8, to an Azure SQL database. Now, I've created the Azure SQL database, but I'm going to talk just a moment about how it was created and what I did. And I have done the defaults. There's nothing really special about this, except that when you go down through and you create it, there's an option to create something with Microsoft Intra ID. And I have used, this is all my students know this is available online, so I don't care if people see it. But I'm a professor, and this is my email address and also my login on Azure Active Directory. And so I've already assigned this as a Microsoft Intra admin for the server, not for the database, but for the server that hosts the database. So it's a virtual server, but nonetheless, that's what we have. And so once I have that, I could check the support only Microsoft Intra authentication for this server, but I am allowing both SQL Server authentication and Microsoft Intra, which is the new thing post Azure Active Directory. So I've created that. I can go back down here if I want to, and we can go and see this has my basic database on it. So let's take a look at that. So instead of just opening this up in Azure, I have this open. This is a query editor and stuff, but I'm just going to continue as Scott at Southern because that allows me to do whatever I want. And the only thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drop a table person, and we can do that. It's not a big deal, but because that was something that I created here before. And I'm also going to drop all of these other things. So let me do that. You don't have to watch. All right, got rid of the ASP.NET identity tables so that we can recreate them in a moment. But I've got, basically this is a database that I use in my class and comes with a pretty standard textbook and stuff. So anyway, I have something that's already there, and then I'm going to have something that I'm going to add, and we can see how these can actually coexist. So that being said, we've got that, and I want to be very clear as I look at this. When I'm looking at the resources, oh, wait a minute. Don't know why I would have unsaved edits, but okay. I don't mind resources. Yes, it's okay. I want to be very clear about there being a SQL Server and a SQL database. The SQL Server is what actually has authentication set up for it, and the University database also has authentication set up based on what is set up for the admin role here in the server. So I have my Microsoft Intra admin is already configured, and when I went down and looked at the Microsoft Intra ID, it showed that I was the admin. So I have to be logged in to my university account to actually do anything with that. So we're going to use those two, and we're going to, and that's all the prerequisites, by the way. That's all we have to have, everything running there. So at this point, we need to actually go through and create an app. So let's do that. And what we're going to do at this point is create a Razor Pages app. So I'm just going to create a new project. I'm going to say that it is a ASP.NET Web Razor Pages, and I'm just going to call this the .NET SQL right here, .NET SQL, and we'll just say next. I am going to do 8. I am going to have the individual accounts or the Microsoft Identity Platform. At this point, I'm going to do the Identity Platform. We can do individual accounts, and that would be fine. If I use the Identity Platform, I probably should just do individual accounts at this point. We'll go back and play with identity another time, perhaps. At this point, this has already created some default stuff for me, including a database connection. But if I look at the app settings, we'll see right away that the database connection is just to a local DB instance of MySQL. I'm sorry, MS SQL DB. And so we don't want to use that. So we are going to change that and connect to the Azure. And it's not too difficult to do. I am going to go over here to my dependencies and look at my managed NuGet packages for a moment and see what I have installed. And you'll see that I have ASP.NET, ASP NET Core Identity, Entity Framework Core, Identity UI, the SQL Server, and the tools are all there, okay? And the only thing that I would add to this is the designer. So I am going to go over to browse, because if I don't do this, then I won't be able to do some of the scaffolding things we do later. So this is going to be Entity Framework Core Design. That's the one I'm looking for. Some 433 million downloads. That's probably pretty popular. And I am using 8.0.3. Okay, so accept that. And we've got that in there now. So beyond that, the next thing to do is to actually add some code to connect to my, my Azure instance. So to do that, we need to change the connection string. And to change the connection string, I'm going to change this to be the connection string I get from, and I can just do my Azure connection string. So let me go back over here to my Azure database, all resources, Azure, and I can go to connection strings. And this would be intra passwordless authentication right here, which is what I'm going to use. So I'm just going to copy that, and I'm going to go, whoops, I'm going to go over to, back over to here, and just put this information right in here. Now the only thing other than this is that I don't want to make this the default connection, okay? In fact, I don't need any of this stuff. I believe that's all I need. But I do need to change this, and I'm going to change this to Azure SQL _ connection string. And in so doing, I'm going to have to update this in a few other places, but we'll see why I'm doing this a little bit later. But I have to go over here to my program and change this Azure SQL connection string back over here to, instead of default connection, I'm just going to put that in. Okay, so we've got that in there, and I believe everything is good to go. Again, I mean, if I hadn't done this already, I would have to add in this build services, add DB context, application DB context, use SQL Server connection string, which is what I just got. And then I've got you know, the developer pages and whatnot. Now, there's a recommendation that we do this a little bit differently. And so I'm just going to say, well, it doesn't really matter, but I can say if I'm in the builder.environment.isDevelopment, then in this particular case, I'm going to say builder.configuration.add environment variables, and I'm going to put in my app settings development.json. Now, I don't have any of those in there right now, so I'm not really worried about it. And my connection is going to be, no matter what I do, my connection string here is going to be the same. So I'm not doing anything except adding this, saying, hey, you know, we can if you want to put in some app settings stuff, you can do the development JSON, which is all of this information in here. Okay, So I don't mess with that very often, and I'm going to leave it at that. Good. We need to add some endpoints and some other things in here. I am going to actually add the following classes, and I'm going to go into data, and I'm going to add to my DB context here a couple of things. First of all, I'm going to add a new class, and I'm going to call this one person. No big surprise there. And this public person class is going to have some information in it. We call it a public int ID, and this one is important in a class. Anytime you name something ID, and I could name this person ID too, that would work. Anytime I name something ID or the class name followed by ID, then it's going to assume that that is supposed to be an identity in the database, and it will automatically increment it and populate it. Okay, so we're going to do public string first name get set and a public string last name. Now I am going to do this add this empty string there, and the only reason I'm doing that is because otherwise it'll give me warnings. So basically what it's saying is, hey, no matter what, we're going to put empty strings in there, not null values by default. And then I'm going to go back in here into my public class, and I'm going to add a public DB set of type person, and we'll just call that person get set, and we'll save that, and we'll build it. Okay. Now I need, let me build this first to make sure it's okay. And I look at my output and we'll see if that builds correctly. Great. Build succeeded, 0 failed. That means I'm ready to go over to my package manager console and populate the database. So before I do that, I'm just going to check really quick. Here's my Azure stuff. If I just reset the tables here, nothing happens. I've got no person in there. Okay, so let's do a add migration, and we'll call this the initial, and it'll say build started, build succeeded. Under this action, use remove migration. So that's great. Now I need to do a update database, and that should build and succeed, and it might take a second to actually connect to the database. So interestingly enough, this failed, and it failed to log in user blank. So that's because I have not logged in, and so there's a couple of different ways I can do this. I'm just going to do this from PowerShell because that's probably the easiest way. And before I do that, I'm going to show you one other thing really quick, and that is if I look at my resources, if I go to the CS Southern DB, this is my server, not my database, but my server that the database sits on, and go down to networking, you'll notice that I can have disabled selected networks or secured by perimeter. I'm having selected networks here, and then I added my client IP address. So that's my IP address, the one that I'm using to connect to it right now. And it could change from time to time because I'm at home. But this one actually, once I add that, that'll actually allow me to get onto the system. So in order to log in, I'm just going to go do a AZ login, and it's going to say, do you want to log in? I'm going to say, yes, I want to log in. And it says, great, you're logged into Microsoft Azure. You can go back and do all sorts of stuff. At that point, that's all I really need to do. And I can go back down here and then just update the database again. And we'll pause while we're waiting for that. Okay, it's always interesting to run into problems when you're doing a demo, but in this particular case, it looks like it has my credentials and it wants me to re-enter them in Visual Studio. So I'm going to go ahead and which directories would we like to continue using? Visual Studio encounter problems when attempting to access some directories. Really? Sign out. Okay, let's sign in. This is a worker school account. Thank you very much. Okay, so apparently when I copied over this connection string, I missed this Active Directory default value over here. Oh, come on. So this, I said actually authentication equals nothing. And we do need to set it to Active Directory default. And once you do that, the update database runs correctly. And it looks like this. And if I actually go back and look at the database at this point in time, I'd be able to see that we now have a person in there. So not only do I have person or persons, looks like it's pluralized it, I also have all my ASP.NET claims and roles and users and stuff back in here. So that's great. Just a matter of actually getting the connection string right, and everything should work just fine. Of course, you do have to log in. So now that we have that, the next step really is I'm going to scaffold up some stuff and then we'll deploy it. So I'm going to go to Pages over here and I'm just going to add a new scaffolded item. And I do this with my students all the time because this helps them see code that they wouldn't normally see or would have to dig through documentation to see. In this particular case, I'm going to select my model class as person, my DB context, which there's really only one to choose from, and then you can leave everything else as default. And I'm going to go ahead and no. I'm going to go ahead and cancel that. We'll just do it again in a second because I do want my pages to add a folder first, and I'm going to call this person. And then I'll do the new scaffolding to that, because if I don't, it's kind of a pain to delete it later on. So I am going to do the Razor Pages CRUD, and I am going to pick person, and I am going to pick application and add. This time it doesn't give me a warning, and it says, yeah, it looks like you know what you're doing. So it'll scaffold everything up, and then we'll have that. While I'm waiting for that to finish, I'm actually going to pull up Azure SQL Studio over here. And I think what I want to do is run a query. So I'm using, well, the only database that I can use. Let's see, select star from persons. Interesting that they would call it persons, but they did. Oh, I want this one right here. We'll go ahead and connect. And you'll see that it doesn't have anything at all. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to insert into persons. And we're going to make values. And all I need is the first name and last name. So I'm going to do Dan Laws. I'm mixing up names of people I went to school with. And I'll run that. And then I can run this one. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I want you to see that this database, which we just inserted something into, is going to actually have everything, is going to actually have what we inserted. So when we run this, the problem is that if you look at this, there's going to be some errors. And then the errors are going to be related to this person. And the reason why is because I have to qualify this. So I'm just going to go through and copy that. And I'm going to run through and yes, do every single one of those. And by the way, it's just doing that sort of for me at the moment, so I can save all that, build it. And the reason why is obviously because I'm naming something in here. I have a class called index model that has person, so I can't do person. which is fine. Just kind of an annoyance that it does. If it really bothers you, you can rename things if you like. And with that, let's go ahead and run this. Now, the interesting thing about it is, of course, it'll open off on another screen. I can go in here, and I don't have to log in or do anything like that. I can just go into person, and that'll put me in the directory that I'm looking at, and it'll take a little while to load, but eventually it'll load right up. And here we have Dan Laws, and I can edit it. I can create a new one if I want. So I can do Scott Peters and create that guy. And you'll notice back over here, you can see that what things are happening if you want to look, but now I have all those there. And I can go back to Azure Studio over here and select persons and run that, and I'll have both of those names in there. So I am running things across the database, and everything seems to be working fine. The next thing is to deploy this to Azure. So let's do that next. To do that, we're going to right-click on this and click Publish. And it's going to say, what do you want to do this? And I'm going to say, I want to host this on Azure, host your application in the cloud. So next. This is an Azure Container app. We can do an app service, an Azure App Service in Windows. It doesn't really matter where I put this, but I can put it under Windows for right now. This is what they recommend for this particular one. And this is our school subscription. And it says there's no existing instance available. So we're going to have to actually create that. Let's create a new instance, and this stuff here is going to be populated for me. You'll notice this one says star next to it because it hasn't been created yet, and so this .NET is the actual service name, and it's going to be in my Azure for Students in CPTR 319 is my resource group, which is my database class, and then I have a .NET SQL plan for hosting. So I just have to hit create on that, and that will take a moment. The next thing it comes up with is this, and I don't have any deployment slots right now. It'll try and load those, but it'll just be blank, so that's fine. I'm just going to finish at this point, and it'll say publish profile creation processing, and I go through here and I've got it all set up. And you go, great, all I have to do is publish this. So you go publish, check if your application will run successfully. It's going to publish. We don't need to watch that happen. Okay, finally the publication succeeds, and I can go drag this over here. And I have my website called .NET SQL, and I have the ability to go over to persons and see it fail. In fact, I totally expect it to fail because what has happened is that although it has the ability to log in, it doesn't have access to the database. I have not given this particular application access to the database. So to fix that, I actually have to, there's a couple of different ways that we can do it. And I'm going to show you both ways so that you can see the differences. In order to do this, I need to go back over here and show you that we do now have an app service called this. And I'm going to copy that. And a plan here. So these two things have been added. We had the CS Southern DB and we had the University Large database. Those are there. This is new. And I just need a copy of this one. And I need to go into Azure. So I actually have this all pre-populated. The only thing I needed to do was the name of this application. So in Azure, I am, for a web app, creating a connection. I want a connection to create to SQL, where my group is CPTR 319. Now, if you don't know where that is, I can actually go in here and look and see that my resource group is CPTR 319, and I could copy that and dump it right in there, but it's the same. And the name of the application is this one here that I just pasted in. And my target group, the group that it's actually going to, the group that it's actually going to here is also in the CPTR 319. The server is cs-southern-db, and the database is university large, and I want to use system identity. So if I just run that at this point, it'll say, warning, the behavior of this command has been altered by the following extension, server connection connector passwordless. And it goes through and it says, there's a warning, connection name is not specified using generated one. So this is a problem here. You should, if you don't specify this, then it will assume that you want to use the one that I have actually specified, which is the Azure SQL connection string. Okay, so this will take just a moment to finish. And when it does, it'll dump a bunch of JSON in here that I could parse if I wanted to, but I don't. So that's it. That's all you have to do. You do have to know what each one of these things mean. So if I go back here now to the university database, I could actually see some security down here. And if I go into users, you'll notice that I have two of these. This one is the one that I had before. I can delete that one. And this is the one that exists. So it isn't, you know, this one ends in 242. Just want to verify that. 242, yes. So I'm going to delete the other one, yes. And I'm going to go into this one here. This one. And I'm just going to edit it. Properties, I can actually see that in here. And if this was done right, I would have access to everything in here. So it seems like, I don't know that this is exactly correct. I'm not going to change anything right now. But we'll come back and probably have to change something in a moment. So I've gone back. I mean, I haven't done anything new, just fixed the problem with the database, and I'm back to person here, and it should come up. And indeed it does. So now I have it deployed on Azure websites, and I can now go through and edit and delete stuff and do whatever. Yes, delete Scott Peters. All right, so there we go. We've got it deployed, and everything appears to be working correctly. I will show you one little caveat that I ran into. If for some reason you didn't specify the SQL connection string, when, you know, like I did not do that here. I just left that part out because this is what they told us to do in the tutorial. So if you're following along in that tutorial, that's great. You'll notice that if you go down here to the database, I'm sorry, to the app here, and you have to go to environment variables to get the connection string. They sometimes may tell you to go to configuration. If you do go to configuration, the funny thing about it is that they'll actually tell you, view and edit your application settings and connection strings here, which is, if you click on that, it just takes you to the environment variables. And this is the app settings here, and it doesn't look like it has any connection strings at all. So I think we're probably okay the way I did this. If you need to edit, you can change your connection strings here and tell it, you know, that it's a deployment slot setting if you want to. And I don't have any deployment slots right now. Remember I said earlier we had deployment slots, so this is a production one right now. I could add a slot if I wanted to, and I could call it, you know, instead of production, I could call it something else. And this would be where you would want to change your information and things like that, because we want to be able to change the name of, you know, possibly the value of our connection string and stuff like that. So I'm not going to do that because I don't need to do that right now. Anyway, so that's it. The deployment is all done. So I think I'm ready to say have a nice day, and we'll see you again maybe in the future.